Greetings and salutations, netizens. This is Wolfphototech, and here we are with another delightful video. This time I'm going to talk about a manga. No, it is based on a manga. This is actually the Goblin Slayer TRPG. Japanese typically just use TRPG as opposed to TTRPG or CRPG as a designator for tabletop role-playing games. They literally treat the word tabletop as an entire word, which incidentally, it's written typically as an entire word, so it's a singular compound word, so there you go. If you notice, this book is actually a rather different format. This is actually typical for most Japanese TRPGs. Before I really get into this, it's important to note that in Japan and Asia, these are actually a large portion of the tabletop gaming community's choice of games. For Japan, Dungeons and Dragons is actually one of the more... it's actually more popular than most any other Asian nation in Japan. However, it's important to note that Dungeons and Dragons is not even close to being number one. It is really, really not even close. The number one tabletop role-playing game in Japan that is not native to Japan is Call of Cthulhu. So, if you want the true king of tabletop role-playing games, I've actually found through various research that it's actually Call of Cthulhu is the number one worldwide. Just Dungeons and Dragons has the name recognition, and it's super popular in the United States, Canada, and it's more popular in the UK than anything else. Which incidentally just happens to be that, the countries that are most important as far as YouTube and media is concerned, because they're English-based languages on an English-based website, and yeah, you get the drift. But anyways, other than Call of Cthulhu, you have tons and tons of these. You got the Sailor Moon TRPG. You got various other mangas like Dragon Ball Z and other stuff like that in TRPGs. So if you really start digging into the TRPG scene in Japan, there is like hundreds of these. And if the anime and manga is around long enough, it will eventually get like 2 or 3 different TRPGs to it. This is actually really new overall for Goblin Slayer, but Goblin Slayer is actually somewhat newer too. As most mangaka are concerned, they are workhorses and they just keep pumping out stuff like crazy. As you can see, this is a softcover book. This is a thick book. It's over 600 pages. I'm not joking. But anyways, you open to the first page. I have not opened this extensively, but I have read bits and pieces of it. You got Goblin Slayer and Kumo Kagyu. This was actually published back in 2019, but the Western release has just been recently released within the past few weeks. You have a nice little section with the table of contents. Now, what's really important is that, being that he's a manga writer and artist, he also went ahead and there's a prologue section here, prelude to a certain bard, where you actually have a little short story for Goblin Slayer, or basically a side story that just runs along, novel style. Personally, I don't get why the female elf has so little armor. The goblins are really, really randy. But anyways, you go to there and boom, you got the little prologue to the TRPG. It's a really short story. And then it goes into a prologue introduction section where the creator talks about his experiences with TRPGs and his fun. Yeah. And then he goes into, this is like a really fun little guide section that breaks down every little component. I mean, from like super noob, like you never knew what a TRPG is, but you're a fan of Goblin Slayer. This book is just like, it literally goes over every little bit. It explains how to read dice. It explains the roles of a game master. It explains the roles of the players. It explains how to write an adventure. It explains a lot of really basic, a lot of the core basics for this system. He literally itemizes everything in here. He has a section on participants, 6-sided dice, because it's a D6 system, writing tools, a story. On to the next page is sheets, location, time, because time is very important. And then he goes through the process of session flow, explaining preparing for the session, leading up to the session, preparing the story before the session, create the characters day of the session, introduce characters day of the session, begin the story day of the session, ending the session day of the session, and it continues on. Then it goes through all the basic terminology as such as players, role-playing, point of warning about getting carried away with role-playing, a little warning section right here. He's like every little ticker here. He's just like, these are the pitfalls. These are the things you might be interested in. These are the things that you might need. These are the things you don't need. These are the things that you should do running up to doing these things. He explains the D6 system that's operated in this game. He explains what a PC is. He explains what a GM is. He explains ability scores, basic scores, enemy bosses, monsters, rounds, calculations with decimals. If you end up with decimals, he explains that when you're rounding. He explains every little bit in the prologue section to such a fine degree, or a fine enough degree, that it is like, oh, okay, I understand exactly what we're doing here with this thing or with this interaction in the system. And then it pops over into the character creation section. Yet again, there's that elf with way too revealing clothes. I just don't get. He even he dissects the character sheets in very fine detail. In the very back of the book, there's a character sheet. It's a single fold-out character sheet that is actually extremely simple overall. That doesn't take long to figure out, and it flips to the backside. So the front side is all your basic stuff, and then your back side is all your periphery things. But anyways, and your details on your items in greater detail, as well as spells. But he goes through all the little bits of how all your character's components work together. He has charts all over the place. That way you can understand the relationship between focus, endurance, reflex, and how it relates to strength, psyche, technique, and intelligence. Because it's based around a grid system like this for your saves and your ability scores. As you can see, he goes over strength focus, strength endurance, strength reflex, and that mechanic repeats over with psyche, technique, and intelligence. So the book is just spot on with everything. He talks about life force, which is basically your HP, and he explains the quick mechanic of times 2 life force, they die. You know, if an enemy does twice the life force of your character, they're dead. Movement speed, spell uses, base spell resistance, wounds, fatigue and fatigue rank, attrition track. Yet again, he has a very well worked out little section right there that shows you how everything works out mechanically on the character sheets. You have advancement points. In here, in the advancement point section, he references the other pages that are tied to the advancement point system. You got adventure levels, class levels, you got skill section, you got spell selection section, attack section, armor section, possessions and money. He goes over all the little fine details like exact currencies in the world and their conversions and so forth. He has a sample creation section where he basically walks you through the process of creating your character step by step by step in an exact order. There's only about 18 steps for the character, and then he immediately on the next page actually breaks it down in a chart for each one of those steps for your basic selections and how things relate to each other. So if you are like, and then you got sample backgrounds down here. So if you are really interested in this game, this is actually written in such a granular detail, yet it is not heavy on the math or mechanics to such an extent that it's not terribly difficult to thumb through this, get it like, oh, I get it. Oh, yeah, that's interesting. What? Where is that a feature? Oh, there's the numbers. And it just keeps going and going. As I said, this is 600 pages of rules for the system. He goes over different classes, like veteran, a dwarf shield fighter. He has charts, lots of charts and tables, you know. Oh, I have to also remind you that this system is a D3, D6 system. It uses a combination of D3s and D6s, but you can easily convert that. You just really need D6s. And I just kind of like thumbed through this and read it quickly in various places to get a good general idea. You got different origins, like human origin table. You got a dwarf origin table, an elf origin table, a lizard man origin table, a rhea origin table. You got a table for determining the past, determining an encounter, add a bonus point to a preliminary ability score section, write down your status. And he really goes through all the details explaining the mechanics in quite deep. I'm still in chapter 1 here, by the way. He goes over each individual classes. You know, the fighter, the shaman. You got the fighter, the monk, the ranger, the scout, the sorcerer, priest, dragon priest, and shaman. Then he even has a section on recommended spells for each of the spellcasting classes. Like Sorcerer, the most basic attack spell is Firebolt, page 299. An attack spell that the enemies can't resist is Magic Missile, page 304. A spell that deals additional damage when a weapon attack hits, Enchant Fire, page 284. A spell to unlock doors and chests, the spell is called Unlock. It's on page 282. So he's even nice enough to give you example builds and suggestions for some quick spells for your characters to learn based around their classes in here. So this is really it's not comprehensive and thick like Pathfinder or older systems like 3.5, but it's still, he wrote everything down in such fine detail that it's you could just keep reading through it, and you will eventually, if you didn't understand it in one section, you will eventually get another example somewhere else that will like click it in your brain. He has a section on determining profiles, creating a high-level characters, and so forth. I'm still inside of the character creation section. It's just He pulls everything out, and then he goes over. He has a chapter 2 is the basic rules, so it actually frames out all the little basic mechanics of the system, the turns in combat, and interactions between your character and the world, and so forth. And yet again, he has flowcharts. He has lists of checks that your characters can do, such as initiative check, hit check, dodge check, block check, spell use check, spell maintenance check, spell resistance check, provoke check, movement obstruction check, movement obstruction resistance check. And then you have some other ones like resistance check, different types of resistance checks like strength resistance, psychic resistance, intelligence, spell resistance. You got muscle strength checks like strength, escape, climb check. You have fitness checks like swim, climb check, acrobatics check, jump check, dodge check. Manipulation checks like first aid, handiwork check, hit check, block check. Stealth checks is stealth check and handiwork check. And he even has, like, when he goes into that, he even, like, denotes the classes. Like, the handiwork check is applicable to, like, scouts and rangers. And the stealth check is more applicable to a scout and ranger as well. And then they got pages here, as you can see, down the side here. Sorry, the camera is going to focus in at any moment. But anyways, it just... then he explains in details all the checks. And this keeps going on and on. I mean, he puts a good deal of effort in giving you a few good examples of various things and just going over it. He explains movement in the system. It's not grid based. It's directional. He explains free actions, combat flowchart. So if you literally do not know how to play this game, just reading through this book is gonna eventually get you there. And then sitting down when playing with other people. I just have to like flip through this because this is a really thick book. He has cumulative experience points, adventure level, and then required experience points for each level. This is a level 1 to 10 system, not a 1 to 20 like Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder or Starfinder. Considering the way Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is balanced, it's almost as if it was meant to be a 1 to 10. Then you have Chapter 3, which is Information for Adventurers. By the way, I skipped through a whole bunch of pages because it will take me forever if I go over every single page. And this section is basically all the adventurer skills tied up with your character. You got nice lists, and the lists reference, give you basic information on it, and reference the page in which it's tied to. And it tells you the skills tied to classes, and other ways of utilizing the skills. And that just keeps going and going. As I said, I can't sit here all day and talk about it. They got a section on monster knowledge, like mastery grades for effects of monster knowledge, beginner and intermediate, expert, master, and legend. You got general skills section. The skills section seems to be like the chonkiest section there is overall in the book. Back up a little bit. Then you have a little section right here in the back of Chapter 3 called Words of True Power. They got a difficulty class. They got words of true power, creation, life, difficulty, etc. And essentially magic. There's actually a rather nice selection in here. And it just keeps going. It's the magic the Words of True Power section / magic section is actually quite extensive. Then you go into various items like you got cloth. You got your. Need to back up here because I actually skipped past a bunch of it because the items basically appear immediately right after the spell section. So you have all the weapons all charted out and an explanation of how to read it. You got one-handed weapon section. You actually have a really nice selection of one-handed weapons as well as two-handed and so forth. You got like different like a Flamberg, Estok, a bastard sword, an eastern saber, a great sword, blunt axe, hatchet, hand axe, tomahawk, battle axe, great axe, halberd. You got spears. He put the halberd in with the axes, which is kind of true to it. It's kind of like a halfway point between a pole weapon, been like a spear, a really long spear with an axe head on it, and just an axe. A blunt spear, a javelin, a short spear, a spear. You got an entire classification of spears. You have a plume, a pitchfork, a trident, a long spear, a glaive, a pike. You got mace. You got various types of maces, such as a blackjack, a club, mace, pickaxe, heavy mace, morning star, war pick, warhammer, and a maul. You got various types of staves, like a sling staff, a garnet staff, a priest staff, a corsair, a quarterstaff. Nunchaku is classified as a staff. Battle rod, flail, iron rod, whip. Which is weird. Whip is within the staves. And then there's Vampire Killer. It's a holy whip. And then you got ranged weapons, various types of thrown hand weapons like bolas, darts, stones, boomerangs, slings, throwing daggers, chakram, mabili, sling staff when used as a ranged weapon for firing stones. You got a beautiful selection of different armors and stuff like that. And then you go into chapter 4, which basically explains the world setting. So, as you can see, it talks about the age of war, the age of magic, the age of adventure. It goes over each of the races. Humans, dwarves, elves, reyes, padfoots, lizardmen, harpies, myrmidons. It basically just talks about the cultures. Dark elves, because the racial stats are in the front of the book in the character creation section, but the character race history is in the world setting section. Got dark elves, the gods. Got a section on the Earth Mother, the Supreme God, the Trade God, the God of Knowledge, the Valkyrie, the God of Awakening. And then it goes over religious views of the races. Talks about the calendar. It actually goes over the calendar for you of the various different seasons and basic holidays. You got spirit arts and miracles section, ancestral dragon arts, necromancy section. Basic explanation on it. The kingdom, nobles, civil servants, and just keeps going and going. It just gives you a basic overflow of what each of those categories is all about. And the academy, evil cult, slaves, languages. I have to jump to chapter 5, which is the game mastering section, which is not terribly thick, but they covered most of the basic mechanics in the front end of the book. So hey, it talks about reading the rule book, what it means to create a story, and so forth. Names of characters, game progression, and so forth. Session management. And then, as you're flipping through it, it has a little warning right here. And they even included an adventure in here. So, there you go. You got yourself a little adventure. You got a map, you got some other stuff tossed in. So you already have one adventure, but wait, there's even more. There's even a second adventure with a basic overflow of the events, and there you go. And then with the two adventures, you get a monster section in the back end of the book, which then explains at the very beginning how to read the stat blocks for the monsters and how to run them. And then it goes into, obviously, goblins right off the bat. You got a lot of different varieties of goblins. Then you got some giants. You got some various other creatures like ropers, deer, bump beetles, and so forth. Green slime, giant mantis, python, wormling dragons, rock eaters, giant vulture, basilisk, bear, manticore, giant crab, elephant, wyvern, venom snake, rock, treant, young red dragon, and then you have a section on spirits like skeleton archer, skeleton guard. I'm not going to list them all, by the way. I'm going to skip a few. A Dullahan, vampires. You got a section on demons, like a stone demon, a giant eye, archdemons, greater demons. You got magical creature section like a gas cloud, creeping coin, dragon tooth warrior, gargoyles, iron golems. You got a section on villains like hoodlums, harpy, cultists, thieves, gillmen, enforcers, runners, and so forth. Werewolves, mercenaries. And then in the very back, you have the index. So if you want to look up a particular rule or mechanic, you can always look up, like disabled is on page 30. Dodge checks, information about dodge checks is on page 137, 150, and 187. And in the very back of the book, you got the staff that helped in producing the book. And then right after that, as I said before, and I showed you earlier, you got the character sheet, which is perforated right here for cutting. So get that in the camera. And it's basically just one long sheet that's folded over. It is slightly longer than a standard piece of paper. So, but there is special printer paper that is about that length, or you can take a photo of it and reassemble it in another computer application and make copies of it. So there you go. I say this is actually rather interesting in itself. I have yet to play it or really extensively read through it in great detail, but it shows a lot of interesting promise as a fun and enjoyable tabletop role-playing game, particularly if you are really into wanting to play in the world of Goblin Slayer. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe, and see you next time.